Director, in your mid-year update on student loan complaints, you highlight a particularly egregious practice where lenders automatically put a loan into default if the loan's cosigner dies, becomes disabled, or declares bankruptcy, even if the borrower has never missed a payment. And that practice to me is extremely unfair to borrowers who have been making their payments on time and whose loans are current and in good standing. And I'm in the midst of drafting legislation to fix that problem. But my question is, what are some steps that can be taken under existing law to protect students from this practice, students who might otherwise be able to qualify for their existing loan either on their own or with a new cosigner? And does the Bureau have the authority to remedy this practice through rulemaking, or do you need additional legislative authority?
So thank you for raising that issue, Senator. It was shocking to me, and I want to kind of describe the practice so that people understand it. And tremendous work, I will say, done by the Student Loan Ombudsman in the CFPB, who has been just an outstanding advocate on behalf of the young people who bear student loan debt burdens across this country in significant measure. The practice was that nowadays, the vast majority, I think 90% plus of student loans that people take out have a cosigner on them. Often a parent, maybe a grandparent. And what will happen is the student then attends school maybe for multiple years, ultimately graduates and begins to repay student loans. They may well have a spotless payment history, and yet suddenly something happens to the cosigner. At this point, the parent or grandparent is aging, and eventually some of them pass away. At a time when that young person is now affected by the death of their parent or grandparent, we saw student loan servicers calling in the account because the cosigner is no longer available on it. Rather than considering the situation, working with the borrower, working out a payment plan, or recognizing that they've made a spotless payment on time, that was the way they heaped trouble on these poor affected people. And it was not right. I think the issuance of the report itself has sent people scuttling throughout the industry to avoid a repeat of this. We heard from one of the major servicers just the other day. I mean
to interrupt you because my time is limited, but short of the report and public shame, is there any regulatory ability to do anything about this, or do you need additional authority?
I'd like to have our folks talk more with your staff about what additional authority we need. But I do think that the shaming here is a great example. It's
I'm
having
all
a
for
significant
shaming,
effect.
but I'd like to have a guarantee. Many borrowers are having difficulty releasing cosigners, even though this was an option prominently advertised to the borrower upon signing up. What's the feasibility of requiring an automatic cosigner release in a situation where the lender's conditions are met?
I think that may be quite possible, and I'm not clear in my mind as I sit here now whether we need legislation on that or not. Obviously, when things are written in legislation, they're more lasting and more secure. Okay. But we'd be happy to work with you on that.
Would you make that part of the agenda that we're going to follow up on?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
As you said, we're now at 90%. We used to have 67% of private student loans were co-signed in 2008. By 2011, that number jumped to 90%. So this whole issue of co-signers, the whole issue of a young person passing away or having a disability and then having their parents now facing this debt, the whole issue of even if there is forgiveness at the end of the day, getting a big tax liability, is issues that we'd like to work with you on. Because I have serious concerns about where we're at on those issues.
I strongly agree with the issues you've raised and the concern you're sharing about them. At a minimum, even if something gets worked out after 4 or 5 or 6 years of hassle and frustration and struggle, it's not a good situation for people.
No. You would think that death in and of itself would have some finality.
You would think.
Let me ask you one other quick question on prepaid cards. The last time you were here in November, we discussed your upcoming rulemaking on prepaid cards. This is something I've followed for some time. You can have products that largely remain unregulated. Consumers can fall victim to all types of hidden or abusive fees, being charged for customer service or just to check your balance, or sometimes if you want to cancel the card because the fees are too high, you get charged more fees to close the account. and we have legislation dealing with that. Can you provide an update on the status of the Bureau's work on prepaid cards, and what's your expected timeline for a proposed rule?
I can, and you and I have discussed this a fair amount. This is a market where people don't realize it, but they're subject to no consumer protections currently. There are billions and billions of dollars being loaded onto these cards, and that's a growing market. We had anticipated that we would have a rulemaking proposal out in June, which is this month. It's now taking us a bit longer. It will be into the summer before that can happen, but it's very, very high priority for us right now. It doesn't indicate any particular problems about the rulemaking, just that it's hard to work through some of these issues. We're getting there, and we'll have something fairly soon.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.